You're watching part 2 of a special edition of Inside Kansas Politics. Welcome in, I'm Rebecca Chung. Homelessness is a complex issue, something lawmakers on both sides of the aisle can agree on. The question is, how do you solve it? We're starting off today with hearing from people who are bravely sharing their experiences and what it was like at one of their lowest moments. For people who are down on their luck, like Michael Union was, he says the Topeka Rescue Mission is like a refuge.
The Topeka Rescue Mission changed my life.
Union says he grew up around the mission, and for him, it's a place that holds a lot of history.
My mom, she worked here. She actually passed away back in 2015 from cancer. So it was just a lot for me.
Union says he eventually found his way back after spiraling into drug addiction. And we also spoke with Courtney Haskey, who says she was struggling with an abusive relationship before seeking help.
I used to smoke weed. Meth was like my other main addiction besides weed.
What are some of the biggest barriers you think that stopped you from seeking help earlier?
Myself, because I really wanted the meth. It was really just meth. I stopped weed, stopped smoking cigarettes, vaping, all of that, and really just clinging to meth. It really had a strong hold on my life. And I tried giving it up. I was living with an older brother of mine at the time when I was going through my addictions. I am blessed and grateful that I did have him in my life at that period of time. He was definitely trying to help me as best as he could, but it was really ultimately up to me to stop, but I just couldn't.
The Topeka Rescue Mission provides food, shelter, and social services to people in need. With their help, Union says he's now transitioned to working as an assistant chef at the mission. And for Haskey, she says she's found a support system for her and her child, away from the domestic violence she says she was experiencing.
Were they handling the bills and all that stuff? And
right.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah, I didn't work. I just had to take care of my kid, and if I did something wrong, it was they took everything, my cars, where I lived at. That all got ripped out from underneath me.
And what was running through your mind at that point when that happened? What were some of the questions you had?
I had no idea what to do. I think my sister was who got me here the first time with my first son. This time I had to be pushed a little bit, but it wasn't easy.
Executive Director Lamanda Broyle says it can be difficult to get people to seek help up front.
People don't trust instantly. Sometimes we can be criticized that we're enabling, or that we're taking too long to help somebody, or how come that person's been in and out of the shelter multiple times? And my answer to that is because none of us are the same.
Broyle says one of the things her organization is struggling with is addressing housing needs. She says it's sometimes like playing Tetris with coordinating beds, trying to find ways to keep families together. And at other times, they'll have to turn people away because their shelter is full.
It's equity access sheltering, and so the system is like our outreach teams, Vallejo outreach teams, people can go to the city directly if they're in need of housing services, and there is an intake form that's done. And so if it's someone on the streets, Vallejo's outreach team or TPD's outreach team or TRM's outreach team helps that. They go out into the field, helps get the data for the EAS group at the city that needs it. And then there is eligibility requirements and prioritizing based on score. And there is currently a 1,300 to 1,400 person wait list right now, just to get somebody into the affordable housing.
Lawmakers are sparking discussions about homelessness at the state level. A special committee meeting for the first time ahead of session. But Broyle says the next step is taking action.
The idea of giving someone a hand up instead of a hand out, yes. It's always the argument that comes up yes. in these conversations. Do you think this is going to be something that is used in debates in the legislature if it comes down to taking action at the state level?
One of the things that we need to be really careful about when we are discussing whether it's in our own homes, whether it's a council or a state committee, we have to be really careful about our own personal biases and really looking at what is data showing us really helps someone and what isn't helpful.
When we come back, we're sitting down with a panel of local and state leaders to get their take on tackling homelessness. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
The Quanta True Hybrid, handcrafted in America. Individually pocketed springs combined with natural latex and organic cotton. Every coil independently adjusting to your body contours, providing amazing cloud-like comfort.
Shop the huge luxury closeout sale at Lebeda. Queen Plush just $479. Talalay latex, adjustable beds, and two-sided mattresses. Get 0% financing for 4 years. Hurry, sale ends soon at Lebeda.
Hi, we're Rick and Penny Cluse with God's Storehouse. This past year, with your continued support, over 1,300 individuals were able to shop for clothing at no charge. We helped furnish over 200 homes and made gently used items available at an affordable cost to all.
So we want to thank you. Because of your generosity, we employ over 70 with livable wages and benefits.
We also offer free pickup services for your gently used furniture and larger items. We're excited as we look forward to future plans of expansion and serving our community.
Growing the market for Kansas-made E15 is a win-win for Kansans. What's E15? It's fuel with 15% ethanol compared to the usual 10% in regular unleaded. E15 is more affordable, has better performance, and runs cleaner than regular unleaded, meaning Kansas drivers can go further for less. From helping Kansas farm families by stabilizing grain prices, helping Kansas become more energy independent, and adding more than 4,000 jobs in Kansas, more of our money stays right here at home because of ethanol. Visit fueledbykansas.com to find a station near you.
Devon James and 27 News, honoring veterans through Veteran Salute.
We're proud to honor our veterans for their service to our country.
And we would love to share their stories. Please nominate a veteran at KSNT.com.
Be sure to watch 27 News Wednesdays at 10 p.m. as Devon James Injury Lawyers and 27 News honor our veterans with a Veteran Salute. Veteran Salute, sponsored by Devon James Injury Lawyers.
You want sports, we've got sports.
KU and K-State sports on K-Nation.
Highlights, scores, interviews, you name it, we have it.
So whether you root for the Jayhawks or the Wildcats,
you'll love the coverage we put together for you every single week. We hope you'll join us every Sunday night right after 27 News at 10.
as we bring you another exciting week of K-Nation.
Sponsored by 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We have several guest panelists in to talk about plans to solve homelessness issues in the state. Joining me today is State Representative Frances Auerkamp, who chairs the state's Special Committee on Homelessness, Topeka City Councilwoman Christina Valdivia Alcala, and political analyst Bob Beatty. Thank you guys for joining me today. We're going to get right into it. Now, homelessness is one of the biggest issues local governments are dealing with right now. Christina, you can give us some perspective on that. How is this issue impacting the Topeka community, and what steps is Topeka taking to combat some of the issues that need to be addressed?
I would say that over the years since I have been in the seat, which is going on 4 years, the issue has grown exponentially. I believe seriously that we are in a crisis moment, and my sense about it is that the city of Topeka, along with the city council, is being much more proactive and thinking forward. How do we deal with this crisis at this moment in time? We are looking at the implementation, which has gone on a little bit of a standstill, of the camping ban ordinance. That is, for me, and I think for a number of folks on the governing body, it has ended up being a much more complex and nuanced issue about what we do with camping, whether it should actually be on city property, whether we should have a complete ban and have no camping. I know that there are a number of folks that work with the homeless population that would want that, just reversed altogether, but that's not going to happen, because businesses are telling us in Topeka, homeowners are telling us, neighborhoods are telling us from across districts that something has to be done, and we understand something needs to be done.
And what is being done?
Well, like I said, we have the camping ban ordinance that will be going into effect, but we are waiting until after the new city council is seated.
Gotcha.
Because this is definitely going to impact their districts and their constituents as well. We have a consultant that the city has paid for that is now and has been for 2 to 3 months working with the city along with up to 20 agencies that interface with the homeless and the unsheltered population to come forth, and we need to give this about 6 months more worth of time, to come forth with a sustainable and long-standing plan moving forward, not being reactive about it, not trying to do a Band-Aid approach, because I think that we understand at this point what we have been doing and all the money that the city has poured into homelessness and homeless prevention that we can talk about later, is that that approach has not been working. We are strengthening up what we see going on in neighborhoods with our community police officers and neighborhood improvement associations, working more closely when they're having issues with the unsheltered population. But I think that one thing that we do need to highlight in this conversation is the complexity of this situation, the nuance of this situation, and how deeply it is impacting everyone across the city and ultimately the taxpayers.
Now, moving on to action on the state level, Francis, we have the Special Committee on Homelessness that met for the first time during the interim period here, but one meeting doesn't seem like enough. First off, do you plan on having another one?
Yes, I think during the legislative session there will be a lot of discussion on this topic, so we'll probably have at least another informational hearing and see if there is any legislation that gets introduced to address the topic.
Okay. And based on the feedback from the first meeting, what's one of the key takeaways you found from how this is impacting other communities across the state? And what do you think those gaps are in addressing this issue?
I think it was very clear that it first starts at the local level. And I think Christina mentioned the efforts put in here in Topeka. And also, Christina's been working at this for many years, and they are now taking it seriously. We see in some communities that have taken it seriously for several years now do not have a big problem, and other cities who are still not addressing it, their problems continue to increase. So what we saw out of that committee is that it starts at the local level. They have to be proactive, and they really have to think seriously about law and order. And we saw that, especially in Lawrence, we had some business owners there, and that was their first statement, really, was we need to start with some basics. Activity that you or I could not do, we would be in trouble for, we would get arrested for, they kind of look the other way when the homeless population does it. And the business owners, one of the phrases they used was equal application of the law. And that's where they would like to see things start. So I think, once again, it's the local problem first, and it's really up to the local authorities to begin the process in their cities.
But what can the state do is also another question. And does that go back to enforcing the law? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, I think as far as the state getting involved, a lot of times we hear from cities that no, they have their local control, and that's how they would like to see it stay. And I think as far as the state involvement, there's different ways to look at it. I think there's certain funding available. We had a bill last year that we looked at that would somewhat restrict funding if the cities were not following their laws that they had on the books. And so if a city's not taking it seriously and following their own laws, then they shouldn't get additional funding. They need to start by doing their jobs on a local level first. And it's one method of this state approaching it. Another one is to allow business owners a little bit more flexibility. We can take a look at business owners forcing their elected officials to take it seriously. We've seen that in cities around the United States where business owners have grouped together and sued their city because the city was not following their own laws. And so I think supporting those business owners, property owners, in their efforts to really defend their personal property and their capital investment is very important.
Okay. And as far as this meeting that did take place, was it just to gather input for now, or what is the main priority there?
Yeah, I think, as was mentioned, it's a complex issue, and it's also an issue that has been increasing over the years. And so the purpose of the meeting was to get information, but also to get a little bit of understanding of how broad the issue is. Because a lot of times in Topeka and in politics, we hear of one solution, but often it's not a one solution idea that really works. And so we're trying to broaden our understanding so we can get the perspective from a lot of different cities, a lot of different organizations running the country that have tried and succeeded, and what options are available.
All right, and we'll keep our eye on potential meetings during session. Now, going on to Bob, there's a couple of approaches that can be taken when it comes to this issue. There's the housing first approach, right, which provides people with immediate access to stable housing. Some say it's more direct because how do you solve homelessness? You give someone a house, right? But then there's also a linear approach, which is more of a gradual progression. So where you go from transitional housing to permanent housing, and some say that this gives people more time to address underlying issues with mental health or drug addiction. Now, is either approach, in your opinion, Bob, better than the other when it comes to Kansas's needs? And what factors could come into play when it comes to policy next year?
So, yeah, I'm here as a political analyst. So the politics of this, to quickly answer your question, I mean, yes, these approaches are part of the solutions. There's a couple things I'd like to add right off the bat. First of all, it's good for Kansas, for Topeka, to be addressing this now. We know that just 2, 3, 4 years ago, we were watching on TV, at least I was, Seattle and Portland, and part of at least me and others might have said, oh, these people out in the West Coast, they don't, look what they are dealing with, It's not going to happen here. Well, eventually things that happen in New York and the West Coast and Phoenix are going to make it to Topeka or in Kansas, and they have. But so, is it a crisis? Yes. Yeah. Is it anything near what has happened in Seattle and Portland and recently in Phoenix? Thank goodness, no. So it's really good the legislature and the city of Topeka and other cities are being very serious about this. I would actually argue the legislature should probably have a standing committee, and this should probably be a weekly. I mean, as far as I know, were people from Wichita at this meeting? I heard somebody say that Sedgwick County wasn't at the legislative meeting. So we shouldn't stop here at the state level. So there's numerous approaches. It's housing, it's mental health. We can get into this later, but it's also a national issue. And I've been in Iowa following presidential candidates, and it's coming up on the national level. So you mentioned it is a local issue, but if it doesn't if there isn't an approach to it that can work, it'll leapfrog, to a state level or even a higher level, and then there'll be mandates that will come down to the local level that may or may not work at the local level. But yes, of course, housing, mental health, but also law and order are all parts of the solutions.
All right, Bob, thank you. We're continuing our conversation after a short break. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Protect your home from sudden power outages with a Generac home standby generator installed by Shockwave Electric certified experts. Call Shockwave Electric for all your commercial and residential electrical services.
K-State, KU, all sports.
Join us every Sunday night right after 27 News at 10.
As we bring you another exciting week of K-Nation.
Sponsored by 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
Need a little inspiration this holiday season? Fairlawn Plaza invites you to shop local, eat local, spend local, and enjoy local. Shop our collection of more than 30 local businesses. Enjoy a snack, coffee, drinks, or dine at one of our terrific restaurants. Bring the kids to see Santa and Mrs. Claus. Fairlawn Plaza and our locally owned merchants are all together better. 21st and Fairlawn.
Hurry in and beat the clock. It's the year-end savings event now at the Mattress Hub. Save up to 50% off, including the Sealy doorbuster deals that fit every budget. Or relax in luxury with free adjustable bases on a huge selection of Beautyrest mattresses. Year-end savings only at the Mattress Hub.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung, where we're looking at potential solutions to homelessness issues in Kansas. Now, this is an issue that can't be solved overnight. We know that. Christina, what are some things, though, that the state can do when it comes to this issue, in your opinion, to step in and help?
Well, I want to back up just a little bit before I answer that question, because we also need to look at, I've been banging this bell for 4 years about how this was going to get worse and worse and how deeply it impacted the district that I represented. So the crisis ended up spreading out throughout the city more amongst districts. And there was more and more pushback from small businesses, especially about the impact. So when I started doing more research about the amount of dollars, time, effort that were going to not only the homeless and housing, but also this other part of the homeless population, which is the unsheltered population, because we have to give those nuances, okay? I mean, the unsheltered are the ones that, to me, are camping along the embankment of the Kansas River. They are the ones that are going onto private property, on city property, on trails, and they are camping. Now, we should treat as much as we can with compassion, and yet I agree with Representative Auerkamp that some of this also has to have a law and order component to it. I think this, where I believe the imperative comes between at least Topeka and the state would be for funding. We are going to need more dollars. We are going to need to find ways to work together in a collaborative manner to learn, as far as, you know, with Topeka and the legislature, with what other municipalities are doing, what is working, what is not. Because it's exactly like Dr. Beatty said. These issues surround affordable housing, the lack of affordable housing, which we do not have enough housing right now in Topeka, the lack of addiction services that we have, the lack of beds for mental health, and the unsheltered. All of these issues have increased in Topeka, and I would dare say that they are increasing in every municipality, major municipality across Kansas and the nation. So we need those dollars. My own, as a district representative, belief is we also need to start dealing with the undergirding, the systemic issues that are not being dealt with, in my opinion, that cause some of this. And that would be what happened to our state hospitals. Okay, those were shut down in the 80s and 90s. Topeka, the governing body, is not necessarily wanting a state hospital here in Topeka. We know that we need more mental health services. State hospital, we need to talk to the legislature about. We also need to talk about what is our ability as a municipality to start talking about living wages, because poverty keeps coming back again and again and again in these conversations, as well as with the mounting crime. Poverty. It's not saying that's the only thing, but there are a number of issues that we can do, and I think that the governing body has a very aggressive legislative agenda for 2024, and a number of these issues that we're talking about tonight, we seek with our lobbyists and with individual council reps and coalitions that we are building with small businesses and neighborhoods to take that to the legislature.
And Francis, can you agree with that it's going to take more money, more state hospitals, maybe more money towards certain services for local government?
I think the first step with any expenditure is we have to first understand what monies are being spent now. And to just simply say more money is very easy to do in Topeka. To throw another program at it, then we can say, look what we did and move on. Mm-hmm. But I think the first step is to look at the money being spent, and also it's to look at what are the policies being followed or being implemented or not being implemented in these different communities. Because if a community is not following, let's say, best practices on what really does work, and they simply want more money, the end conclusion is not going to be any better. And there's a good chance that we see the homeless problem actually increase because the homeless community does communicate, and they will move. And if a city does not enforce any laws and they provide a lot of services, guess what? More homeless will come, and we've seen that in cities here in Kansas. So I think the first step is to make sure these cities are actually following some good best practices, which we can learn from other cities around the state or around our country and state, because some of our cities in Kansas are doing a good job. And then make sure the money being spent is effective. But I think just throwing more money at the problem, we've seen from California, it doesn't work. We actually have to think about what we're doing and think logically about what we're trying to accomplish and make sure we're following a path that is going to be successful.
So then your concern is aiding a lifestyle out of this, right? Like aiding homelessness by providing more services. Is that?
Not exactly.
Okay.
That's definitely part of what's called a complex issue. Mm-hmm. It's not just a one size fits all. So there's a lot to be considered. And one of those, that's part of it, is not wanting to aid a lifestyle. But that's just one of the main components. As we heard many times in our interim committee, and we've also seen around the country efforts to look at it more holistically. I think there's a group looking at coming into Wichita that's been successful down in San Antonio. I think it's called One Hope. And it's actually a large campus, if you will, that takes a look at all the services needed to help individuals get rid of their addictions, work through their difficulties, learn a trade, learn some skills that will help them become more sustainable. But it's a very big picture, very holistic approach, not just, hey, let's throw more money or let's take a look at one thing. I think what we're seeing as the successful model some cities are using is to take a look at more the start to finish. How are we going to help that individual get back on their feet and have a sustainable lifestyle from there?
Okay. Now, some of the other solutions that I heard come up during the state committee meeting were along the lines of mental health services, drug addiction treatment, and housing, of course, but then Medicaid expansion. We also saw a push for that. Now, that could potentially help with this issue, some people are saying. But Francis, I know you may have some thoughts on that, as other Republicans in the legislature do. But let's start with Bob first. Bob, all of these solutions, of course, they're going to take money. Which one should the state consider taking up next year? Which one do you think would be most feasible?
Well, I think the point here is very well taken, which is targeted approaches. For example, if there's a program that some cities have used of outreach teams, but also with proper laws in place, and not being afraid to put in those laws because one court out in Boise, Idaho, says that you can't do something. You have western states in Oregon and now California and throughout the West who traditionally were quote unquote more liberal that are now asking the Supreme Court, please allow us to have what they call some reasonable laws to be able to put into place. So that allows then cities to have targeted outreach teams that can go help people, but say we have to make this, this law is in place and enforce it. So a combination of the two, that sort of program, it's going to take money to hire those people and they have to be trained professionals. And law enforcement also has to be part of that. The mental health piece is absolutely really interesting because it's the society back in the 70s decided that the state should not really be running mental health facilities on a large scale. State hospitals were closed down, other things changed. But now there's many people that say, where are people getting their mental health care? From jails. Yes. And law enforcement is saying, hey, we didn't get trained to do that. So that's something the legislature could look at as targeted programs, whether it's some sort of facilities. But it was just a few years ago in Topeka that at least one governor wanted to shut down TARC, which is for physically disabled. And where would all those people gone? Local facilities. This push to localize, it can be good, but in other cases it's dumping everything onto cities and counties, and they can't afford it in many cases. And then the state gets to say, well, we're for the people at the local level doing it. So yes, the state programs that work looking at other cities and not Great Society and just saying, hey, let's throw money at it. And that's not a good answer, because it'd be wonderful if we could say, here, the answer is this. But that's why I said I think the legislature wants to keep working at this, and then by the end of a session say, here's the 3 most successful programs in the United States. And if it takes our Attorney General joining up and asking the Supreme Court to allow us to do it, maybe that's what it takes. Because on other issues, the legislature is happy to challenge court decisions at the appellate level, even Supreme Court decisions. Kansas and other states have said, well, we're going to try this again. So that's why I saw when some people were saying, well, we're not sure we can do this because of the court ruling. Well, there's a lot of Western states that say we're not going to just go with that. We're going to have to challenge it.
Yeah, and Christina, I see you shaking your head over here.
I mean, I would say I want to give a more on-the-ground approach to this. Never would I say to just throw money at anything. I come from a family that never did that. I come from a community that didn't do that. So I don't believe in throwing money at anything. And I also believe in the law enforcement component. But I want to give the realities of what we're dealing with in Topeka right now. We are understaffed by almost 40 police officers, and we've been trying for several years to get that back up to par. And it's just like anywhere else across the United States, we're not able to staff the law enforcement. The other thing that I've seen after 4 years is the incredible strain that comes to law enforcement for dealing with mental health crises that they are not trained to deal with. The other thing that I see is because of our lack of enough mental health beds, what has happened is that mental health is becoming criminalized. And sometimes that is definitely needed. But what we know is happening now is that Shawnee County Jail is putting into probably over $20 million for seriously mentally ill individuals that come into the jail service to create 100 beds. So instead of having a state hospital, instead of having facilities that we know we need to have to treat the most chronic mental health issues, which are bleeding out into our neighborhoods and into our downtown, what we are seeing is that this is all going into the jails, and our jails are full. That is some of the bottom line of what we are looking at. So this is exactly what we're all saying. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's not going to be the same in Topeka, Shawnee County as it is in other locations. I can only give you an on-the-ground look of here in Topeka.
Okay. And Francis, I wanted to get your thoughts on Medicaid expansion, but what are your thoughts first on what Christina just mentioned? Because that's pretty shocking, right? About the jails that are compensating for those gaps in services.
For sure. And it's one of the advantages of getting ahead of it a little bit. We heard from the homeless shelter in Manhattan how they have been working on this for many years with their law enforcement, city officials, and I think they were very clear. They don't have a problem because when they meet, they look ahead, they can anticipate what they're going to need, and they work with their community officials and their law enforcement on making sure they have a solution. So I think a lot of these things are a problem, probably because they were neglected or not addressed in the past. But going forward, I think if these local communities can come together with their authorities and work through some solutions, that's the first step.
Okay. And what about taking care of those gaps so that they don't have to compensate in that way? Is that?
It's definitely something we can look into.
Okay. Well, I wanted to now shift to Medicaid expansion because that is an argument that has come up, that Medicaid expansion could be one of those solutions. Is this something you may be willing to consider when it comes to this issue, or at least something that you could come up maybe for a vote next year? If not, what are some alternatives?
So with Medicaid expansion, I think if you take a look at California, I think they've expanded Medicaid. It doesn't seem to help there. You take a look at a lot of states. I don't think it has anything to do with solving the issue. So I think that's a completely different discussion from homelessness. I think it's right now, I think there's certainly people that do want to expand Medicaid in Kansas, and they're using anything, any idea out there to try to bring Medicaid in and say it'll solve all problems. I think that's a strange concept. We can take a look at states all over the country that have expanded Medicaid. They don't have paradise on earth in those states, and actually a lot of those states are having a much higher problem than we have here in Kansas. So it's not even part of the discussion.
But then again, Democrats citing healthcare access being a barrier in this situation. That's Democrats, but then you also have some advocates, community advocates, that are saying, well, Medicaid expansion could help, right? Is that something that you'd be willing to listen to, or?
Oh, of course, we listen to about everything in Topeka.
But not something that could potentially come up as a solution, you think?
Once again, to say that's a solution, well, let's just take a look at California. Do they have problems with homelessness in California? Yes, they do. Do they have Medicaid expansion? Yes, they do. So I don't understand how we're equating Medicaid expansion to solving homelessness. It's not close to being part of the solution.
Maybe mitigating the problem. Bob, did you have anything to say about
Well,
that?
again, if I'm the political analyst, it's not going to happen because the Republican leadership of the House, Kansas House and Senate said it's not going to happen. And it came close to happening a couple of years ago, and the Republican leadership wouldn't put it up for a vote. That's fine. This is a democracy, and that the people elected those people into those positions. But his point is correct that it does not look like this is the issue that's going to, all of a sudden, the Republican leadership's going to say, well, now I'm rethinking this. I don't see that as the political analyst. So no, everything, I'm not saying what you're saying is right or wrong or anything, but everything you're saying could be 100% correct. But if the leadership is not willing to put it up for a vote in the legislature, it's not going to happen, and there's no indication they are.
Okay, thank you all. We'll continue our conversation on homelessness when we come back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
This holiday, New Sound Hearing and Tinnitus Center encourages you to slow down, listen, be present with your loved ones. Your family is the reason the New Sound staff does what we do. Have a Merry Christmas.
The story of Grace Med has always been told through its people, both those who serve and those who it is our honor to serve. We meet at the intersection of compassion and vulnerability, bringing health where there was illness and hope where there was despair. Our patients come to us bearing the weight of living in the margins, and we share the love of Jesus Christ with them by providing compassionate quality health care for all their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Because health restored is always hope renewed. Find hope today by scheduling an appointment with Grace Med.
The Holton Weathercam is sponsored by Ellis Boys, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram.
Talk to people about siding, I talk to people about windows, I talk to people about decking, and it was just beyond me, and I couldn't get it to fit together. Window Design came in and they basically put it all together. I would recommend this company to anybody, my neighbors especially, because they've all come over and wanted to see my house. It was a great experience, and the product obviously speaks for itself.
Let us make your dream project become a reality. Call the experts at Window Design and Remodeling. We are your home remodeling specialists.
Mouth-watering, enticing, satisfying. Taco Villa. Since 1973, Taco Villa has been serving up their own style of delectable Mexican food, from the thing to the nacho platter to the low-carb salad and everything in between. Taco Villa satisfies. Take it to the next level and smother anything in our famous signature chili con queso. Get your fix. Dine in, carry out, or call ahead with your order. Taco Villa on 21st next to the toy store.
Have a cute kid? Sign up today at KSNT.com and we may feature them in the news. Watch 27 News weekday mornings to see if we feature your kid.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're continuing our conversation on homelessness. This is the finale of our two-part special where we're getting answers from local leaders on solutions. Now, we're coming to an end of our time here. We've seen discussions taking place on this issue, but now let's talk about concrete solutions. So a big question people have is, when will we see action taken? Bob, what should the biggest focus be for state lawmakers next year?
Well, you said state lawmakers. I was going to compliment, or at least say that leaders in some cities, especially Topeka, are taking it very seriously, are passing ordinances. And I'll say that maybe the tipping point was some scary moments that have occurred in Topeka. When people, in Topeka there's a trail called the Shunga Trail. When people, which many people enjoy, jogging and taking their kids, and strollers and biking, when some people started thinking they can't even go on a jog in the trail that's been there for 35 years. And that's good for communities to address that. You mentioned Manhattan is doing well. So the focus for communities is to address this, and for the state, I think it's to assist those communities and to honestly, talk to those communities and say, what programs can we help you with? Is there outreach teams that you'd like to have that maybe the state could fund? That would be a targeted program. It's not just throwing out money here, take $5 million and do with it as you wish. It's maybe there's some targeted programs that multiple cities say, gosh, if we had a targeted outreach a program coupled with the laws and ordinances we've passed that allow for enforcement, along with some targeted mental health resources, then the state can say, okay, for that purpose, here is the money for that program. I think that's where the state can step in, and it's not a Democratic or Republican issue. If it's targeted money to help businesses and to help communities. And again, it's not Republican or Democrat, because businesses are very upset about this, and we've seen what happened to downtown Portland, for example. Businesses were gutted, and that's not Democrat or Republican. So I think this would be a great session for the Kansas legislature to, by the end of the session, say, here's possibly three different funding mechanisms, even if it's not ton of money, but to say for communities to apply to or to put into action, because we've already heard there's some real needs. If they're going to pass ordinances, they're going to have to be enforced, but enforced in a way that helps people too, which will take resources.
Okay, Francis, we're going to get your thoughts on that targeted money approach in just a second. But first, Christina, what are some things we can see change on the local level here in the capital city, and what will the state need to do to assist in that?
I think at the local level, I do believe Seth Wagner with AIM Strategies was part of the legislative hearing that occurred. And the downtown now has a cache of businesses working in conjunction with law enforcement that in the last 30 to 45 days has really seen a turnaround. So I think that is really more the exception than the rule, what downtown Topeka has started to develop. As I stated, we know that the actual execution of the no camping ordinance has not gone into effect yet. However, I will tell you, in the past year and a half, the cost for Topeka to clean up probably about 40 camps has been $150,000. Since August, the fire department here in Topeka has had close to 140 calls to deal with fire emergent issues, emergency services that are dealing directly with homeless individuals. So what we see as part of the consultant that we have that is now working with 20 different organizations that interface with the homeless and the unsheltered is, again, a long-range sustainable plan. Because if we don't start, and the city absolutely needs to take the lead on this, with getting these organizations to come together, because in my opinion, there has been too much of a disconnect, there has been a buildup of silos, and when that happens, then what you are doing, in my opinion, is you are servicing, but you are doing the same thing over and over that is not working. And so it is up to the city as a leader to say, we all have to come to the table. We need to bring down our barriers. That includes the city too. And we need to start working together, because we cannot start looking at quick fix solutions like a low barrier shelter. We don't need a low barrier shelter in Topeka, because Denver, Colorado, Colorado Springs, Colorado, have seen that that does not work. It has devastated the businesses around it and the communities. My district has suffered immensely because of the unsheltered crisis. It's a low to moderate income district. So we also have to start looking at where these locations for our shelters are located and the impact that it has that has been ignored. And I will say it has been ignored for a long, long time. And my goal is to fight for my district, to fight for that equity that they deserve as a low to moderate income district, which has small businesses, which has neighborhoods, hardworking people, law-abiding people, and they want to know what is the double standard about.
Francis, I wanted to get maybe your thoughts also on what Christina mentioned, but also on the state level. What are some concrete steps that you can promise right now to take next year, and what actions will we see?
During our interim committee, it was very interesting because one of the business owners that was presenting from Topeka and who's led the effort with the businesses, law enforcement, the city working together in downtown Topeka, he referenced the bill that we had a hearing on, the Safe Cities Act, and the attention that the legislature gave to this topic last session as one of the things that kind of helped spur the idea to address the issue and kind of almost take it into his own hands, working with his employees and law enforcement, say, let's get something going. And I think we tried to do the same thing with our interim committee. Tried to just help people come together. Let's have the discussion. Let's shine a light on the topic, and let's show who's doing a great job and also who's not doing a good job. And we heard business owners from Lawrence talk about calling their city and saying, I have people threatening me. I have people, essentially going to the bathroom in front of my business. What do I do about it? And they were ignored. One lady said, what do I do to protect myself and my employees? And they said, just buy a gun. So I think just throwing more money at it isn't the solution. I think shining a light on here's what's going on. Let's bring these people together. Let's have these conversations. Let's talk to the people who are successful. Let's talk to the people that are gaining ground on improving. And let's see if we can help some of the cities that are maybe a little bit behind so they can start improving their practices.
Still, but what's a discussion without action, right?
True, but for the state to just have that discussion to make sure the cities are able to make sure their actions are directed towards a solution is the first step. Because once again, there are cities who are very successful on this. They don't go crying to the state, give me more money. They say, let's work together to solve it. It's okay to say, we can do this without the state giving us more money. It's really okay not to add more money. Imagine if people said, let's figure out what we as a community can do to fix something instead of just, hey, send more money from Topeka. Because if we just focus on sending more money and money is the solution to everything, taxes will just grow crazy high. We're already taxed on so many fronts here in Kansas, which once again reduces the amount of money people have to spend. And that will in turn have a bad effect on the economy and their housing expenses, everything. So we need to stop just thinking money is a solution. We need to start seeing what we can do at a local level. And that just having that discussion has already, we've heard a lot of comments behind the scenes because people are sometimes hesitant to come forward. They said, thanks for having that discussion. That now gives our Chamber of Commerce more ammunition to go to our city officials and say, we need to start taking this seriously. And we have businesses now that are willing to come out and call out their local officials when their local officials are not taking it seriously and are abandoning their business owners to letting their capital investment be destroyed, letting their employees be threatened. That's ridiculous. It's not more money from Topeka. It's local officials taking their jobs seriously and helping the people that they represent.
But so you don't see anything getting proposed next year, is what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, but could there be something proposed next year? And what would that look like?
After we've gone through some discussions. I think the first thing is to make sure this local cities are able to, I think, understand what are the best practices. You know, we have a research department at the Capitol. We have the opportunity to bring in professionals from around the country who have been successful addressing this topic. I think one of the more powerful things we can give cities is access to that knowledge to those individuals who are successful, and say, if you want to be successful, do what successful people do. If you want to solve homelessness, take a look at a city that solved it. And so if they're not willing to look out to cities that are successful, maybe we can help them by bringing those successful communities in and explaining what they're doing that works. And I think that's the first step. If somebody's not doing what it takes to be successful, they have to change their life. If the local community is not doing what it needs to do in order to be successful, no amount of money will ever solve their problems. They've got to start doing their jobs. And we see that out in California right now. They've neglected their responsibility. Their cities are being destroyed. Their business districts are abandoned. Why? Because they didn't do their jobs.
So is there something that you've seen on the state level that could possibly be implemented here and work here in Kansas to address local community needs from a state level?
I think, once again, from the state level, we have to help the cities start by doing their job. Because without that first step, we will not be successful. So we first have to take the first step. And I know you keep wanting to go back to what can the state do. All the state can do is take money from homeowners, families, people out there that are striving to provide for their families. All the state can do is take their money and throw it at another program. I think that just adds to the problem we have. We need to stop with that mindset. We need to stop thinking Topeka is the solution for everybody's problem. And we have to take a look at the cities, once again, that have been successful on their own. It is possible. We have to believe that. And there's proof that that exists. So I think we can bring those people together and show these cities what are best practices. And I think we need to stop thinking Topeka, taking taxpayer dollars and just doling it out with another program, is a solution. If we do want to take a look at spending, I think we need to start with our current spending on these programs, analyze our return on investment of taxpayer dollars, and see where we're not getting a positive return, and maybe shifting those dollars towards programs that are proven to be successful. But adding more programs, absolutely not.
Okay, Christina, Bob, did you want to chime in on that?
What Christina said was interesting about the fire departments and about the services. So if homelessness has gone up, which it has, or unsheltered people in various cities, I mean, the simple math is that whatever a city is spending is going to cost more. And so if the county or even the legislature says, hey, you know, we need to do this, and everyone agrees, we want to pass this ordinance, or we want to pass a Safe Cities Act or something, we need to clean up these camps. It costs money. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'm not really seeing the problem with a state program that says, here, if you need this much to clean up camps, for example, because this will be a burden on the property taxpayers of that community, that's a worthwhile program. It's more money, yes, but it's tied to, for example, it's got strings, yes. So I guess that sounds like a program that would help a city in part of a cohesive effort to look at as the city is also doing other things on its own, looking at the state and say, hey, can you give us a hand? We're spending a lot more money on fire services because we're cleaning up camps. I guess that's where.
Well, and I don't even think that we have not, because in the past 4 years, the way that the problem has just grown and grown and grown, my sense is that obviously, when you know something's not working, it's not working. Am I one to sit here and, you know, tell the Topeka organizations what you and you and you and you doing is not working? No, because I'm not at the ground level. Now, if you ask me what my gut sense is when I look at the dollars that go out that the city does provide for some of these organizations, or when I look about how giving Topeka is as a community with donating dollars and charitable contributions and all of that to many organizations that interface with homeless and unsheltered population and say, stop giving, stop giving, stop giving. No, I'm not going to do that either. Do I believe that there are things that are not working? Absolutely. Do I believe we have to come up with new approaches? Absolutely. We came up through me researching it is Built for Zero out of Rockford, Illinois, which deals with unsheltered populations and seeks to get to a functional zero, which is a very low amount because they know after working it for years that you're never going to get to zero homeless and unsheltered. It's just not going to happen. It's been around forever. But what they have done is they have developed a model. I researched that, brought it to the city. We now have equity access shelter. There needs to be some tweaking done to it. Totally game changer for Topeka. However, we don't have enough housing. We are low on housing stock. And so there are so many different tensions in this. Is Topeka saying that they have the answers? Absolutely not. Are we coming to the table finally and saying, we have got to figure this out? Yes. That's why a consultant was hired to get us to the come to Jesus kind of moment that we all need in this city, because what we've been doing is not working. And we have to be very careful because we also cannot be a beacon for additional unsheltered population. What was shown in your clip from the beginning, that is a heart-wrenching face of homelessness. I'm not referring to that as much as what has decimated my district, which is the encampments. And we have to be very honest and say there is a small percentage of the unsheltered population that does not want to help. They don't want to hear about helping. They want to live the way that they live. And that has caused an increase of crime in this community that we are not prepared and are trying our best to handle. That has to be dealt with. But then the conundrum, our jails are full. They get in there, they get on probation, they don't have to pay, they don't have to post bail, and it becomes a revolving door. What about that? Who's to blame for that? Is it the DA? Is it because the system is so caught up with so many people now that where mental health is coming through the jails? It is a complex problem all the way around. Do I think more money is going to be needed? You're darn right I do. Do I think I can sit here and tell you I know what all the answers are? No, but I can tell you I'm working my butt off, and so are a lot of other people in this city.
All right, like you said, very complex issue. We're gonna have to keep tracking it. And that's a wrap on our final part of our special on homelessness. We're working for you, continuing to track this issue and get answers. Thank you for tuning in.